and welcome to Epicenter. No ambiguity, no noise. Let's come straight to the point. I have to apologize for our technical difficulties yesterday. A lot of you reached out to me and said that you were enjoying our conversation with Ambassador Stobdan, and we had to stop suddenly in between while we were still doing the questions. We were talking about very important issues, but unfortunately, sometimes technical stuff or machines have a mind of their own. So yesterday, that's what they got the better of us. But today we are in control, and I am delighted that Ambassador Stobdan is back with us. I'm really thankful to him. Ambassador Stobdan is recovering, and he still, gave me time today. So I'm really thankful to him. I would like to introduce Ambassador Stobdan one more time for those of you who are joining us today. This is part 2, the continuation of what we did yesterday. And I would like to introduce Ambassador Stobdan again. He is a distinguished academician, diplomat, author, and foreign policy expert. He is the founding president of Ladakh International Center, Leh. He authored several books, policy briefs, strategic commentaries, and monographs. He writes op-eds for various national and international journals and dailies. His latest books include The Great Game in the Buddhist Himalayas, India and China's Quest for Strategic Dominance, which was published by Penguin Random House India in 2019. Welcome to the show, Ambassador Stobdan. Welcome once again to the show.
Thank you very much to be with you again.
Thank you so much for agreeing to do this today. As I was telling you before the show offline, that we had many interested viewers from across the country and internationally who were listening in, and they wanted to hear more. So here we are. For our viewers, for the benefit of our viewers, part 1 yesterday, we started talking about Ladakh post-reorganization. So the answer to that, Dr. Ambassador Stobdan gave a pretty good, expansive answer, a realistic answer about how Ladakh greeted the news of reorganization and post 370 abrogation, and where it is now. So for that answer to that question, you may please refer to the part 1 of this conversation. Today, we are going to go straight into the border issues now. Ambassador, yesterday we sort of talked a little bit about it, but we had echoes and everything. I just wanted you to go over a little bit back in time when Pakistan sort of ostensibly settled its border issues with China, and in the process gifted Saksham Valley to China. This was in 1963. This was a year after Pakistan had already withdrawn from Saksham Valley after 1962 debacle that India had. And then, of course, Aksai Chin, on the other side, they forcibly controlled it, and they still administer it. So give us a little scenario of how much of Ladakh now is with China.
Well, the Skaskam Valley that you're talking about is a very important area in the Hunza region of the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. And the Chinese say that Hunza was once ruled by the Chinese during the Tang dynasty in 5th, 6th century. So, but nonetheless, it's a very interesting region. It's in the Trans-Karakoram track on the other side of the Karakoram region. So I think this was ruled by Maharaja until the independence, until 47. But then there was this Chinese expansionist tendency that led to Chinese army entering this area, not just in the Shashgam Valley, but also into Kilik, Shamshal area, in the Gilgit and other areas of Baltistan. So almost entire Trans-Karakoram track was claimed by the Chinese, and because the Chinese and the Indians had a problem at the border in '62, the Pakistan took the advantage of trying to settle the boundary with China in some kind of a quid pro quo. Although during the Maharaja period, the area was far more bigger, but the two countries then exchanged the territories, accounted for something like 5,000 square kilometer area of Kasgam Valley. So this is where this story began, and in 1963 this agreement was signed. But it's a very, according to the treaty and the Article 6 of the treaty, signed by Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and Chou En-lai in 1963, refers to it being a tentative arrangement, subject to the resolution of Kashmir problem. And once that is settled, India and Pakistan will negotiate with China what to do with this 5,000 square kilometer area of Shasgam Valley. But we still claim this area to be ours, and it's very important. Northernmost part of India. Uh, Current Leh Ladakh is not the northernmost, and beyond that is the Shasgam Valley. And now it is part of the Chinese Kashgar province, sorry, Kargaj prefecture, Kargilik county. And then a lot of airports are now being built. I believe Chinese are mining, including uranium and gold from these places. And Chinese are building roads now in Kasgam Valley that connects with the Karakoram Pass. So I think the motivation for Pakistanis and the Chinese to do that in that time, during that time, was very, very idea is to encircle India and have direct access to Pakistan, and through that to Karachi in the Indian Ocean and the Persian Gulf. And the main Pakistani motivation was to resolve the Kashmir issue. They thought by doing this, it will legitimize Pakistani control over this area. So it was a kind of a arrangement which the Chinese endorsed, but it's still a sensitive area. The Chinese are building CPEC project, the corridor project from that area, and another second road which is coming south of it. You see, the Kasgam is on the west of Karakoram Pass. On the east of Karakoram Pass is the real proper Aksai Chin area. If you go from Leh, you come across with Changthang region, and beyond Changthang is the Lingzi Thang. Ladakh is called Aksai Chin Lingzi Thang, but Aksai Chin is been it's a Turkish word, Turkic word to describe the area between Changthang and south of Kunlun range. So we continue to claim Aksai Chin proper, whereas the Pakistanis have given away the western part of the Karakoram to the Chinese, but eastern part of the Karakoram, which is the main Aksai Chin, is still claimed by us, and this is where most of the standoff, the current flashpoints since 1962 or even before that, 1957, 58, they built that road through the Aksai Chin from Tibet to Xinjiang province, and this is the current scene of conflict between India and China.
Yeah.
A lot of details are there. Of course, intention is not to get into the details,
Yeah.
but now we are well off. We have built a road right up to Karakoram, Dolat Beg Ulde, which is close to Karakoram Pass, through the Shayok Valley. It's about 255 kilometers from Durbuk. That's a strategic road which avoids the LAC. It runs along the LAC, but if you know about Galwan Valley, it touches the um, this road which goes to Shawk Valley, which goes to Daulat Bikulde. It's
Yeah.
very important for India to do that, and I think Chinese are extremely disturbed by India's infrastructure development in this area, which is still going on. Most of the infrastructure roads have been already built, but few things like few bridges, some tunnels, all these things need to be built now, which will be completed in years or so. So India is very comfortable at this moment.
Okay. Sir, as a diplomat, you very well know that battles between countries or battles between two adversaries are not just fought on the battleground. Battles essentially actually are battles of narratives, battles of stories that we tell us, our people, and that we tell ourselves. So there are two stories about Ladakh as well. There is a Chinese narrative about Ladakh who think that Ladakh is part of Tibet. Although historically, there is no way we can prove that. We can never prove that. I haven't come across any historical research that says Ladakh is part of Tibet. Ladakh was always an independent kingdom. And then, of course, we have the Mughals and the Zorawar Singh expedition and all that, and the Dogra Empire. But Ladakh was part of British India. And of course, and so was Aksai Chin. And then it became part, then because of it was a legal agreement, because of that, it became part of India, Indian Dominion. So, how is this Chinese narrative being built without any historicity whatsoever?
There is always an attempt by every country to revisit the history.
Hmm.
So the Chinese are trying to rewrite their history not only in this Ladakh sector but also into Karakoram area, into Pamir region, into Kunlun area, into the Siberian area, South China Sea. Everywhere the Chinese are rewriting. Some Chinese traveler went here and there, so they claim that area to be the Chinese. So where do you draw the line? Because the Chinese history is very long as India's. So it depends on where the Chinese draw their line. If the Chinese draw their line of their claims to the imperial China, the imperial China began somewhere in 11th century, 10th, 11th century, during the Kublai Khan period, what do you call it, Yuan dynasty. And then came the Ming dynasty, then came the Qing dynasty, then came the Sun Yat-sen, rule, then came the Communist Party. The irony is that this Communist Party of China, CPEC, still continue to function the territorial claim based on some imperial history. Now, if you call imperial history, then going back to first century or second century, Indian Ashoka Empire or even the Gupta Empire, even the Kanishka Empire expanded right up to both, deep inside China. So there is a problem of the interpretation of history. So the Chinese have the tendency to go back into 2000 years of history, 5000 years of history. But yes, I agree with you. The contemporary history is drawn along how, say, place like Ladakh was ruled by either by Lahore Darbar or Delhi Darbar or Kashmir Darbar, or during the British period in Calcutta East India Company, they also had a say there. The commissioner used to sit in Leh. So, whereas the Chinese or Tibet were under the Manchus till very recently, till 1911, when the last Manchu Empire fell in 1911, and then the nationalist Chinese came in 2012, and 1949 the Communist Party came to power. So my fear is not what the Communist Party of China is claiming or not claiming in this area, like including Ladakh. My fear is that if the Chinese, if in China the imperial rule comes back again, some kind of a nationalist imperial right wing government comes to China, like Taiwan. Taiwan is a nationalist China. Proper China is a communist China. If the nationalists come to power, then I think the Chinese are going to be more assertive about claiming areas in the Himalayas, but no way, of course, today that is impossible to. While they may claim it, there will be problem. But yes, history is a problem. What I'm saying here is that after the Galwan incident, the Chinese have been trying to rediscover, rewrite the history of Jammu and Kashmir, what they say that the independent Ladakh kingdom was had an origin in the Western Tibetan history of Tabo Kingdom, which is the one branch of Tibetan Empire had ruled Ladakh since 9th, 10th century, what they call it Nimagon Empire. The tragedy is that this history is been highlighted by the Western scholars, and the Western scholars take their reference from the Chinese sources. And once the Western scholars write, the Indian scholars repeat that, because Indians have no way of understanding the history of Ladakh, barring the Western sources, the Italian, the French, or the German sources, and the German scholars, the French scholars base their research on the Chinese material of the Manchu dynasty or the Yuan dynasty or the Ming dynasty. So that's a problem. If you want to understand the Indian perspective about Ladakh, then it is from the 18th, 19th century. Then you have to go to Jammu, you have to go to the Mafiz Khana, the archives of Maharaja, which is maintained in the library of the fort there in Jammu, or maybe somewhere in Valley also. Those material have to be used properly. These are well recorded, but Lahore used to have a lot of records. The Sikhs had a history of their own. I used to highlight the Indian perspective about Ladakh from the 17th, 18th century onwards. But then my articles have been circulated, recirculated by Khalistanis, saying that how the Sikhs have done a fantastic job to claim Ladakh and to conquer Ladakh, how Zorawar Singh conquered Ladakh, and therefore it is part of Khalistani, whatever those kind of negative stuff which has been highlighted. So I've stopped writing about the Indian perspective, because there is this dimension of people misinterpreting what you do. So in the process, I don't see anybody writing about that. That's a tragedy. I even say that even Mount Kailash is the abode of Lord Shiva, where our ultimate you know uh, God lives in Kailash, and India not controlling that Mount Kailash is a tragedy. Lord Shiva is a Chinese national at the moment. It is against the Indian civilization. So, but the people are not interested in rediscovering, reinterpreting. Either they go into some mystic, some mythological angle, but Mount Kailash is very much part of Ladakh. It used to be part of Ladakh in 1682. It was snatched from Ladakh by the Chinese and the Tibetans, and we don't have access to that area. I believe now there is a Chinese missile regiment stationed at Mount Kailash, and all that area right up to Ladakh is controlled by the Chinese. In Ladakhi would be more interested in getting back those areas rather than, I would say, Aksai chain is a little bit uh, problematic, because we only used to go to that area for salt collection. We don't have any history of monuments. Yes, I think Zorawar Singh went there to Aksai Chin, had a small fort built at um, at uh, at the northernmost part of the Aksai Chin in Kunlun area. But I believe the Dogra military was not able to control or retain their troops for a very long time, and they withdrew. So it was a non-man lands. If it is not India's, then it was not Chinese either. So that's the problem, and we need to have a out-of-box thinking for that area. But there are problems, because we have a domestic commitment. There is a parliamentary resolution to retake the Aksai Chin area. So I believe that's the key issue right now at the border.
Let me ask you this. we were talking about narratives, and I do sense a little bit of let's say sadness or a little bit of bitterness in you that you've tried to bring out this narrative, and then the Khalistanis hijacked it, and the Indian side has done really nothing to substantiate your argument, and because of that, in the war of narratives, we might be a step behind, because ultimately it is not just the physical battle. As we know, battles are fought in the minds of people as well. So then there is this Chinese narrative about this entire Buddhist sliver of land. So there is Ladakh, and there is Sikkim, and there is Arunachal Pradesh. So they have that narrative. My question is, and I have wondered about this for a long time, that China, we know what their capabilities are at the moment, and we know that they do have the capabilities of going into the domestic uh, politics of a place and then build on the fault lines. You can see China doing that in United States as well. So domestic fault lines, they always take advantage of. In Ladakh, then, there is also a fault line that we have not been able to take care of, and because of which a pan Ladakh leader hasn't emerged. And this has always been a bit of a tragedy to me, because I think Ladakh deserves a pan Ladakh leader who will actually talk about Ladakhis. And so we don't have to have a Buddhist lay and a Muslim Kargil, and somebody who can rise above those things and talk about Ladakh and Ladakhi identity beyond religion. Is that possible?
Well, I think you are right. The military alone cannot protect the boundaries and the territories. The Chinese are working on the asymmetric warfare game. They have a psychological psyop, what do you call it? They're working on religion. I don't say the Chinese spies are in Ladakh. I have no such proof, but Chinese methodology to work in foreign areas or outside their country is through the mechanism of influence, which in the United States, in all over the world, the Chinese uh, have the Chinese, the influence operation, they call it.
We have the Confucius Institutes. Don't forget those Confucius Institutes are
Yeah,
everywhere.
they have many means. This is a Oriental style. I don't think
Yeah.
only Chinese do it, but uh, even Ladakhis would do it. Even the Tibetans would do it. Any Oriental um, mind people, which is not fully trained under Western mindset, would to work along the lines of the influence operation. Now, in the case of Ladakh, it is at the border, it is at the fault line. Something falls on the other side, something falls on this side, and you are referring to the Buddhist culture and on that. So we have monastic connection, we have religious connection, we have connection of not only the living human beings, but even the reincarnated influence. People can be born on the other side, can influence here. People who are born on this side cannot influence on the other side because religion there is regulated. In India, under democracy, religious activities are unregulated. Unless the religious bodies get into some, radical activities, some extremist activities, religion is not regulated in India. So the problem is if somebody is born there and operates on this side, the state can do nothing about it.
Yeah.
Whereas if somebody from the other side is born on this side and try to influence on the other side, that's not possible. Not a single sadhu or from Rishi or a sadhu from UP or Haridwar can uh, infiltrate on the Chinese side and do some activities near the Mansarovar Lake or Kailash Mountain. Whereas I think from the Chinese side, uh, they come in different numbers, different style. So that's the lacuna that we have. We are a democracy; they are a communist. So it impacts the national security, and that problem exists. So Chinese relying on the influence operation is very much there. I don't know whether Ladakh is the case of that, but certainly Ladakhis are not in control of their own affairs. Ever since the death of the tallest leader, the Kushok Bakula, who died in 2003, he was the main Buddhist leader of Ladakh. Since then, I think Ladakh is unable to produce a united, what you call it, pan Ladakhi leadership, which is accepted by both the Shias and the Buddhist. So it's a free field now. It's an open area where everybody tries to come to Ladakh and play their own games. All kind of suitors are there. So it's a case we don't know. I believe there are a whole lot of NGOs working there. I don't know about them. What are they doing? What are their goals? Their funding maybe regulated. I don't know, but in such a sensitive places, such activities do take place. And since it is a part of India, the democracy prevails. You can't say in Ladakh you can't do that. So people are doing that, and I have no idea from where the influences are coming, but certainly the mindset of the people have changed over the years. And during my time, when I was younger, there was no question of we were Ladakhis, we were Buddhist, and we were Indians.
Mm.
A Ladakhi, a Buddhist, and Indians. That's it.
Yeah.
So today, uh, I don't know. Today, the combination may be plus something else, or minus something else, apart from these three qualities that you inherited. So I'm sure it's a problem, but the
Mhm.
state is not reacting according to what is happening now. State will react only when the fire has broken. Then we do firefighting. Let's wait. If something goes wrong, then the government will try to control it. But at the moment, I don't see Ladakh getting drift. In which direction, I don't know. But I am also concerned. Everybody is concerned. Entire generation of Ladakhis who were born in the 50s and the 60s are concerned about the new direction in which the place is going. There is communalization. Kargil is completely under the sway of, the religious ulemas or mullahs or something like that. In Ladakh, there is another scenario.
Mm.
So it's a polarization.
Yeah.
Sometime for some common interest, they do converge at some point, especially on the issue of power.
Mm.
Actually, it's the power. So the
Yeah.
UT issue is more about power. Uh, so whether it is the Shias or the Buddhists, they thought after UT they will be the master of the ceremony, but the Delhi has chosen to send the master from Delhi. So that's the problem. The
Yeah.
Ladakhis don't have the power to. So at the same time, I think these are mental construct. These
Mm.
are psychological issues. These are perspectives people throw. But at the same time, I think the people have some genuine concern because they don't have representation anywhere after the abrogation of 370 and this reorganization of the state. We don't have representative. In the earlier cases, we had MLAs and the MLCs in the state legislation in
Because
Srinagar.
after the reorganization, Ladakh does not have a legislature, state
No, no,
legislature.
no, no. There is a local council is there, but the local council doesn't have legislative power. They don't have power to make laws. So that is the main concern.
Yeah. This government has made some very strong inroads in Northeast. Even their stringent critics will agree that they have made inroads, and the political competition, which is so important in a democracy. As a diplomat, you will agree that political competition between political parties is so important for democracy to blossom. So now finally that has happened. In We see signs of that in Northeast. everything is not perfect, but at least there are local leadership has arisen. They're fighting amongst each other over ideology, over fights, and that is good. Eventually, someone will come up. And Northeast does not feel as alienated from the mainland as it did about even 15 years ago. Um, does Ladakh feel alienated at the moment, or do you think that post abrogation, Ladakhis are just thinking that these are teething problems and we will get over it, and a leadership needs to come from within us? It has to be both sides of the way. Delhi has to cede some control, but Ladakhis also have to wrest some control. So it has to be a good, balance between the two.
As far as the Northeast is concerned, I don't think the intention of the Indian government was bad, even from the beginning, from the 1940s and ones, or even before, during the colonial period when the British used to run those areas. The only change that has happened since the 50s to the current time is that India's capabilities have gone up.
Hmm.
India's economic capabilities, Indian administrative capabilities, and the Indian security capabilities, military capabilities has gone up. So the insurgency, alienation, separation, and all those things were possible when state was not fully developed. See, this kind of economic growth we have now, 7%. India is quite well off now to deal with any situation in any part of the country. Not only in India, but outside the country also. Recently, we were in Ukraine, sorry, in Turkey during the earthquake. So India's capability to deal with crisis situation has gone up. So Northeast was nothing but it was a crisis situation. If you recall in Assam, or you call in Bodo areas, in the Nagaland area, in the Meghalaya, or in Mizoram. All these things have changed now. Plus, a new generation is there. They have been educated in the Indian system. The awareness has come. Democracy is understood. The power sharing has taken place. A lot of transparency, and especially this government has really poured in a lot of resources to make Northeast very, very comfortable. Ladakh is at the very, very initial stage. For 70 years it was under the Kashmiri regime, and Kashmir had no interest. The Kashmir leadership had, no interest whatsoever in Ladakh. They left it to very, very junior officer like 22 years old deputy commissioner or inspector level police used to run that place. They were actually not interested in the development or in the legal issues and the administrative issues. Well, it did not fall under the center because of 370. The central government could not interfere in Ladakh. So the net result was that Ladakhis were left out. A, because the center could not interfere. B, the Kashmiris were not interested in developing this area. So you cannot actually fault the Ladakhis to behave in a manner which they are behaving now. For example, after the UT formation, something like 196 Indian laws have been introduced in Ladakh, like in Bombay, like in Calcutta, like in Delhi, like in Jalandhar or Ambala. The pan-India laws that constitutional provisions now prevails in Ladakh as well. The problem is that Ladakhis are not aware about these laws. So they tend to question, why are you controlling us? We are free in our own land. But that's the problem, that the people have no idea because the Kashmiris have never taught them.
Yeah.
Kashmiris have never believed in their own administrative, in their governance system. They are a very weak system, even in Srinagar. Forget about Ladakh. So, since they did not introduce proper, uh, constitutional methodologies in Ladakh, today Ladakh is facing a problem in terms of understanding what is law, what is constitution, what is rule of law. So they now are asking for a customary law, like you have in some 10 districts in Northeast. They continue to have a special law called Sixth Schedule in Assam, in Nagaland, in some other areas, which is governed under the customary law. If you recall, wherever there are tribal population, tribal pockets in the country, they were introduced. The tribal laws were introduced during the colonial period. The British colonial masters understood that the tribals have to be kept within the tribal areas because they used to destroy or they used to invade or attack the people in the settled areas, like, for example, in urban areas. Some people in, say, tribal belt would come and attack Guwahati or some other areas in Assam, Bengal. So they were confined to a tribal area. At the same time, those who are very smart businessmen who wanted to exploit the tribal people were not allowed to go there to exploit their resources, the tribal resources. So this particular law was introduced in the 18th century during the British period. And in the modern times, during the Nehru period, the sixth schedule was introduced under the Article 244, so where special protection was given to the tribal people. So Ladakhis are now demanding that. My own belief is that that's a little bit of a flawed demand. This kind of a demand is not not progressive in nature. Ladakh should be protected, but some new thinking needs to be uh,
Out of the box thinking instead
out
of
of
sixth schedule.
yeah,
There should be some
yeah
out of
instead
box
yeah
thinking which protects the interests of Ladakhis, but at the same time pulls them to the mainstream as well.
Yeah, Ladakh is actually not tribals. They are Buddhist
Yeah,
or
yeah,
Muslims, very
yeah,
highly advanced
yeah.
societies. Even the Japanese, are Buddhist. You can't say Japanese are tribal,
Mm,
or the Thais or the Chinese. The
mm,
problem is that this knowledge has to be, interpretation has to be understood by
yeah,
the people, and some out of the box, as you said,
yeah.
some new method has to be found to
Well,
protect this area, especially the culture, the environment,
yeah.
all this.
The ecology, the ecology.
Yes, yes,
Um, Ambassador, there is a school of thought, and there are think tank scholars who I interact with often, who think, especially on the Indian side, they believe that China will never settle the border dispute with India because it is in China's interest to keep India on toes all the time while China rises. And China's already risen, but if as it rises more in stature, um, they feel that they will never solve this border region because they want to keep India stuck here. They want India to be always worried and always India to be on pins and needles. I agree with that, but only to an extent, because if China really has ambitions that we know it has of being the giant of Asia or being or replacing United States as a major power in the world or a superpower, how can a major power or a superpower exist that has not solved its border problems? And that goes against anything we have studied in history or political science, because what is a superpower ultimately? A superpower is someone that is a hegemon, that has hegemony over its area as well. So United States has no border issues. So how do these two realities sort of work? As a student of politics, as a student of comparative politics, as a student of international relations, how do you think these two eventualities work with each other? That China will not settle its border problems, but at the same time it wants to be a superpower.
well, being a superpower has nothing to do with the boundary issue. Um, Even Soviet Union that time or Russia had 7,000 border disputes with China, but ultimately they resolved it. in towards the end of 1990s. So the problem is that who is going to solve this in China? Xi Jinping, although controls every aspect of power in China today, but I don't think even he has the guts to touch this boundary issue with China, with India, because there is a domestic problem in China. And in the same breath, I think even in India, Prime Minister Modi is very powerful today. Even he cannot think about settling the border with China. Although if they succeed, both leaders succeed, I think both will share Nobel Peace Prize. I believe, but the domestic situation. I mean, look at this opposition here. The Congress party is saying that you are not speaking enough about China. Why are you shying away from in the parliament to talk about China? No, he has not negotiated or settled the boundary problem. But even before that, the opposition keeps this. So in a
Piles
democracy,
it. Yeah.
yeah, it's a very, very difficult. Whether it's historically it belongs to China or whether it belongs to India is altogether a different thing, because these were an old colonial kind of arrangement. We never had a formal boundary with China. This was customary boundary. The traditional boundary frontiers. We said it was not even boundary; it was frontiers. So the old days, China was not there. There was Tibet, some kind of a Tibet, but Tibet was autonomous. I don't know whether Tibet was autonomous or not autonomous. They used to have a government in Lhasa, but I think the Chinese had some kind of a control over them, like we have control over Nepal or Sikkim during those days, or Bhutan. So the Tibet government used to have an arrangement with Ladakh. They used to have a treaty with Sikkim. They used to have treaty with Bhutan. They used to have treaty with Nepal. The local conventional treaties which Tibet used to have uh, with the Indian Himalayan areas. So under that arrangement, India would have either accepted that arrangement. What are the treaties between Sikkim and Tibet state of that is 1870s 79 treaty, the Ladakh Treaty of 1684 and 1843, what we call it Tingmosgang Treaty or the Demchok Treaty, or also there is a Chushul Treaty of 1842. Then the Nepal Treaty, the famous Nepal Treaty of 1776 or something like that. So, if we believe in that treaty, India stand to lose more territory. You see, so Nehru accepted some British definition of the boundary of the accepting the geographical feature of the crystalline of the mountains. In the east, it was defined by the McMahon line, and in the Ladakh portion, it was defined by the Johnson line. The Johnson line, British were also not clear, but this is what we have inherited from the British in the Ladakh sector, which is the Johnson line. We claim the entire Aksai Chin, including what we talked about, Shkasgam Valley, which Pakistanis have given to the Chinese. So we haven't changed our position, and this is we have been accused by many of adopting a forward position, but that led to the 1962 war, and but even since then we haven't changed our position on the boundary. So the boundary issue is very complicated. It will take time. I don't know. It's a question about uh, whether we have a methodology to start from top bottom or bottom up approach. Like in Russia China case, it was between the two President Putin and those days Jiang Zemin uh, started the CBM, the confidence building measure, and that led to the resolution of their boundary problem in the Usuri sector, in the Central Asian Pamir sector, in the Karakoram sector. So in our case, we have started in 2017 the Wuhan summit between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping. Then we had the second round in Mahabalipuram in Chennai in
And then we had
2000.
Doklam right away.
Yeah, so these are top bottom approach, but the bottom
Yeah.
up approach is diplomatic approach, the military approach, the CBM approach. We have many border agreements since 1993, 1996, 2013, and all these things have not taken us anywhere because the Chinese don't stick to the the agreements or the border agreements between the two countries. So it's very difficult. But you are right. At the current moment, the Chinese will keep the pressure on India on because of two things. One is the Pakistan factor. Second is to keep the Americans away from the Indian borders with China, because the Americans have a clear-cut position on Tibet and in Xinjiang and many other places. So it is a carrot and stick kind of approach, try to discourage India getting engaged with the Americans, and so it's a part of the diplomacy strategy, which at the global level it works. My only hunch is that we should not have a situation where Donbass situation in Ukraine,
Yeah.
Luhansk and Donetsk type
Mm.
of situation happen, because I see the Chinese writings are along the language, along the religion, along all those things. That's a thing which nobody is tracking, and we should do everything to make everything Ladakhi, Sikkimi, Nepali, or
Mm.
whatever Himalayan. The Himalaya is mixed up with Tibet. Tibet is a plateau, Himalaya is a mountain.
Yeah.
So people are not getting clear, because Tibet is a different issue altogether. Whether
Yeah.
Tibet is part of China or not, we cannot say that. It's for Tibet and the Chinese to decide.
Mm. This idea.
Whatever, yeah. But I don't think India was party to this dispute ever. But
Mm.
what is happening now is that this is impinging on the border issue. So that's the real problem.
Yeah, interesting. As a diplomat, you are trained to go back in history and look at relations and sort of foreign policy based on what the history has been. But you're also trained to look at future, or sort of, put a thinking cap and think about what is going to happen in future. I have very little time left now, but I do want to ask you this question that has been, it's a $1 million question or a 1 million yuan question, depending on where we are going heading next. Um, China does see itself, whether or not it sees itself replacing United States, or whether or not it sees itself as a superpower, but there is no doubt in anyone's mind that China does see itself as a giant of Asia, the only one, the super overriding giant of Asia. It wants to rule Asia. Um, do you see, and India has its own aspirations. India is coming up, India's economy is doing very well. The Indian psyche is that of, after 70 years, that, we are an ancient civilization. We deserve our place in the sun. And, we're not going to be under China's thumb. Do you see, as the influence of United States wanes, or as the influence of United States declines, do you see a position where China and India can coexist in what Foreign Minister Jaishankar says, a multipolar world? In a multipolar world, can China and India coexist?
Well, it's a very interesting question. You rightly said that the strategic environment around us has undergone a change in the recent years, partly because of the decline of the US power. That really disrupted the entire calculation, and the United States is no longer the policeman of the world that we saw. They have to leave Afghanistan. They're having hard time even in Eastern Europe. So in many places, the Americans are unable to control the world affairs. Uh, at the same time, the strategic environment has also changed because of China's aggressive behavior, both in the maritime domain and the continental domain, including in the Himalayas. So the imperative for the China to become aggressive and belligerent in this domain of in the ocean, in the land, and in the mountain is driven by their economic uh, goals of controlling the sea line, controlling the pipelines, controlling the so look at the Chinese projects, the Belt and Road, CPEC, in the maritime domain. So they want to control all the uh, areas, including the choke points in the Indian Ocean. So that is very much now has become very, very active. You saw the recent Indo-Pacific activities, the AUKUS, the Quad, and all these things are essentially to contain the Chinese behavior, Chinese aggressive posture in this area. I think India is simply reacting to the US-China uh, strategic hostility and the competition. India is not yet fully in the containment of China. You see, if it was containment of China, you talked about coexistence. Economically, we are coexisting. We are still importing worth goods from China. Politically, it's still there, but there are problems about the specific issues of security. It's not about environment, it's not about science and technology, it's not about other things which the United States and others look at China. India China problem is more of a security at the border, the military issues. So the tendency is to that India will have to react to the situation now prevailing, either through the court or through the G20 or whatever. Recently, we've been hearing a lot of things. Uh, but of course, India has to act in its own national interest to secure its own territory for any threat that we face. The only issue is that I don't see a full-fledged war, especially after the Ukraine-Russia war. Such kind of war is even limited war is not possible. How Russia is unable to finish off Ukraine in is more than 1 year now. Now imagine India and China going for full-fledged war. That's not possible. The challenge, therefore, for India and China is to manage the strategic competition, to introduce new guidelines in our relationship so that we don't end up with crisis escalation and war by accident. This is what we are doing. 18 round of talks that we have at the border and plus other official level talks is simply managing the crisis. And but today we keep on hearing. Yesterday, Foreign Minister spoke, and before that, Army Chief spoke that China is building all kind of infrastructure in the Ladakh sector, and they're likely to keep the pressure on India. So we don't know where, but it's also possible that a conflict in Taiwan can also trigger a problem in Ladakh. Uh, for example, United States uh, think that a conflict in Taiwan uh, will be useful because then part of Chinese resources will be diverted towards Ladakh, or vice versa. So there are military tactical games that we don't know fully, but the issue is that the Chinese have moved very close to Russia at the moment because of the crisis in Ukraine. And India will have to be very careful that having the backing of the United States is not enough. We have to deal with every country. But I do not see what people have been talking about multipolar world, transform multipolar world. World is becoming again bipolar,
Really?
is no longer unipolar that we understood. United States is not the sole superpower, but increasingly United States itself is pushing China to a stage that they could balance with China through a bipolar system. Multipolar is for, after finishing off the Russian strength, there's only China now left,
Mm.
which is good situation for even for United States to have a bipolar world. Multipolar world is a more of a economic thing where the world is far more diffused, the market system is far more diffused, supply chains are far more diffused. Yes, I think the economic hub that we existed in China may no longer be there. It will be shifted to Mexico, it will be shifted to Vietnam, to India, and other places. So that kind of a game is possible. But in real sense, the superpower, the balance of power in the world, I see is increasingly going into a bipolar system again. Multipolar is a good thing. We keep talking about. I have been hearing about multipolar world for a very long time, but then uh, that's not going to happen immediately. We will see in the long run what happens.
Yes, we will see. And that's a wonderful note to end this on. But I just want to ask you this one little tiny question. Do we expect more books from you, Ambassador, with your out of box thinking and very independent thought process and independent analyst? Can your fans expect another book from you anytime soon?
In Ukraine, whenever there's an official meeting takes place, there is a officially assigned person in the meeting to criticize, to be a critique, not criticize, to be a critique. He has the right to critique whatever the official positions are. I am trained to be a critique of any. That doesn't mean that I'm critical.
I know.
I do make critical comments to make corrections in the stated policies.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that I don't endorse. Of course, the majority view will prevail, but the effort is to find some lacuna in an indirect way. The intention is to correct the deficiencies in the policy making rather than disturbing the policy process. So.
As all public intellectuals should do.
Yeah, but that's not the norms now anymore. Maybe in Israel they do have. In the Europe, I don't know. But this is a problem. I've been trained. I worked under Jaishankar's father's, Prime Minister Jaishankar's father, for a very long time. I also worked under Air Commodore Jajit Singh. So we've been trained to think critically. So not to vomit, not to repeat what the others are saying. That's the intention. But people then they think you are trying to be negative. It's not question of being negative. It's trying to be. It's an attempt to find the look at the situation from other angles as well. So that's the exercise. I don't think I will have a time to write any book. I have some medical problem, and this really is a major problem now. My eyes vision has some problem. Can't sit on laptop for a very long time, and although I wanted to write my biography, but it doesn't look like that I will do that. But probably if I'm allowed to write, I will write something on the future Buddha.
That's
You
interesting.
know, the current Buddha is the Lord Buddha, the Siddhartha Gautam.
Yeah.
But the Chinese have started another conspiracy to find the future Buddha in Sanskrit. This is called Maitreya Buddha.
Mm.
Maitreya, the Maitreya Buddha is a myth that started during the time of Lord Buddha himself, and this mythology is all over, including in India, in China, in Japan, in Southeast Asia, in Tibet, in Bhutan. This future Buddha, but they look at the cheek of the Chinese. They are already trying to find out, or find or discover the future of Buddha. Future Buddha to suggest that the current Buddha is a past Buddha. It's an Indian Buddha, so which they do not like to be associated with. So they are looking for a future Buddha, and I believe they have spent more than $6 billion in this project, and
Wow.
blessed by Chinese Communist Party. And I don't think many people know about this issue.
I didn't. I have to admit, I'm someone who deals with this all the time, reads about this, but I did not know about this. So thank you for enlightening me.
Even at the highest echelon of Indian power, this idea about looking for the future Buddha is unknown subject. But it's also true that those who have control over Buddhism, they will have control over Asia. In that sense, yes, this is an unexplored field between India and China also. If you do not want China to be a Buddhist, what do you want China to be? Do you want China to be an Islamic state? Do you want China to be a fully Christian state? I'm asking this question to those ideologues in India. We need to think in a different way also. Obviously, we have tried on economic front, we have tried on the military front, we have tried on many front, diplomatic front, but this religious dimension of India-China relationship, you can easily say they are communists, they don't believe in religion. That's thing. But my own belief is that undercurrents of even the Communist Party is driven by Buddhism. At the root of Chinese Communist Party, there is a Professor Lokesh Chandra who's still alive. He said the
Yes.
cadre of the Communist Party of China comes from the Buddhist monasteries.
Mm.
Even the wife of Xi Jinping is a practicing Buddhist. Father of Xi Jinping was also aligned to Buddhist philosophy. So China, by and large, according to some estimates, 600 millions are also already Buddhist. So it's a matter of time that one day they will fully a Buddhist country. We should not rule out that it's a dharmic state, it's a dharmic nation.
Yeah.
We may not believe in that dharmic. Dharma also has a different uh, interpretation. But why should Dharma be stopped at Himalayas? Dharma should spread right up to there is Dharma in Japan, there is Dharma in South Korea.
There
If
is. There is.
Dharma is spreading in China, what's wrong with it? I think we should not be blind. We should not be oblivious to this kind of things happening in China in the future. So to say that Chinese will be hostile to us forever, I don't think, because Chinese people are on record to say that India has India has ruled over China for 2,000 years without sending a single soldier. Indian, when you go to China, the Chinese, ordinary Chinese people, they worship you, they touch your feet, because they have this tradition of their god has come from India.
Mhm.
India is their God's land. So this myth still continues in China. So for 2,000 years, the Chinese have been worshipping us. They have been looking at India as a Western heaven. So that aspect we haven't explored, partly because there is a hard Communist Party government there, and that Communist Party is also only on paper. Deep inside, even the communists in China send money to monasteries and the monks in the temples for the well-beings of their own elevation and the upgradation in the post. So these things continues in China. There is a cult system which is growing, the Christian cult system through the multinational companies. China is the largest. China is the only country where you have the largest conversion rate going on, followed by Nepal. You see, if a population is atheist, it is very easy to convert them into someone. We don't have such missionaries, including RSS, Rashtriya Sevak Sangh, does not make attempt to export Indian cult system. There are delegations coming from China, worshipper coming from China to Calcutta to do Kali Puja. The asthis, the ashes of some Chinese are coming to Banaras to throw ashes in the Ganges. So these are unexplored area. In maybe after 100 years, our future generation will explore this area. But I certainly look at China not just from military angle. I look at China from spiritual angle. Maybe Xi Jinping is a hard communist leader, but China is a dharmic country. Dharma flourished there for many, many years, centuries. And I have read books that if an Indian dies in China, under the Hindu rites, it's acceptable. Similarly, if a Chinese dies in India, it's acceptable to the Chinese because they don't see this as an alien, spiritually
Ah,
alien land. But if a Chinese and the Indian dies in South Korea, sorry, in Saudi Arabia,
Saudi Arabia,
I
they're
think
not allowed. Yeah.
they will not allow, and you will also not like to be buried there or cremated there.
Right.
So these are finer nuances that goes into the relationship and
Yeah.
images about nation states.
You have given us so much to think about in this 1 hour, Ambassador. You have talked about the past, you have talked about the current, and you have talked about future. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to talk to independent minds like you. And we hope and we pray to God that you recover very soon and you are able to accomplish all that you want to accomplish and write all that you want to write. We pray for your good health. Thank you so much for being on Epicenter. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. To my viewers, thank you so much. I am not supposed to be with you on Sundays, but here I am because we wanted to continue our conversation yesterday. It was such an important conversation. These are the kind of things that you will never hear anywhere. These are the kind of elephant in room conversations that no legacy media has time for. So if you like what we do here, please subscribe to us. Please subscribe to Epilogue News Network on YouTube and follow us on all social media handles. You can follow me personally on Twitter, and I keep giving updates about our future guests and about more scintillating conversations. Thank you so much for spending your Sunday with me today here. This is Sunanda Vashisht signing off.